Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Operation DarkStar, Chapter 28 to Chapter 30, by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 28. Saul led the others up to the second floor. They were all very conscious of the children in their care, none of them taking their responsibilities lightly. "I guess there is no getting around it," Saul said with a frown as he led them into the police armory. The two bikers in particular took eager notice of all the weapons on display. A Benelli M2 tactical shotgun caught Bam Bam's eye. On instinct, he reached out to pick it up, then checked himself, casting a glance towards the detective. "You might as well. We're not here for anything else," Saul sighed. Bam Bam wasted no time. Reaching for a box of 12-gauge shells, he loaded the shotgun, then cocked the action, chambering a round, a large grin on his face. Apache was quick to follow. Taking possession of a custom-fitted AR-15, the biker started loading magazines. "I have a question, Detective," Sarah asked. "Yes, you can have your pick of any weapon," Saul replied wearily. "No, that's not what I was about to ask. I understand you have body armor for your tactical units. I'd like to see the children fitted with the smaller sizes. I know that's not their designed purpose, but under the circumstances, they could use all the help we can offer them," Sarah said. "Actually, that's not a bad idea. We have small sizes with some duct tape. I'm sure we can fit the kids with some protection," Saul said. The distant sound of destruction erupted from downstairs, followed by the roar of something monstrous. Saul ventured to the top of the stairs and peered down, unable to see anything. The noise suggested that it wouldn't take long for whatever was down there would be eventually coming their way. "Kira. Keep the children in the armory, we'll hold the line," Saul said. "And if you can't?" Kira replied. Saul could only frown in reply. Kira nodded and herded the kids into the makeshift bunker, thoughts of failure and her role that would follow lying heavily with her. They remained upstairs, taking up position on the top floor, tensely waiting for the monsters below to start making their way up. Apache looked over at Jared, a smirk appearing on his face. "I think that a gun might have more reach," Apache said. Jared's hand tightened on the axe. His knuckle cracked loudly. The biker considered himself fearless. However, there was no doubting the firefighter's unshakable inner rage that, coupled with his large physical presence, made the former berserker give pause. They waited silently. The seconds passed, felt like hours. Then they saw it. A creature, human in shape. It was hunting by scent. It had picked up something at the bottom of the stairs. "Wait," Saul whispered to the others. The detective knew that others were sure to follow, but was hesitant in wanting them to instigate a further situation earlier than it needed to be. Weapons were pointed, fingers tensed on triggers, breath held, and heartbeats hammered. The dark figure was joined by another, then two others. The first figure, which had been sniffing the banister, slowly looked up into 5 pairs of eyes. It roared both a challenge and warning to the others. Before any of them were able to fire, the lower floor was struck by a tremendous explosion, followed by a fireball so intense that everything below the first dozen stairs was obscured by flame. The resulting pressure that funneled its way up knocked Saul and the others from their feet. By the time they had regained their positions, nothing could be seen. It was as if the fire had cleansed the evil from the building. "On me," Saul said, as he made his way down, his rifle raised. No one questioned the detective. They were quick to follow. As Saul's shoes hit the floor, The smell of burnt meat struck him. He suppressed an overwhelming desire to gag. The stench was so thick, a retching noise behind him meant that one of their number was not so lucky. He bore no satisfaction from this. The walls were blackened and smoking from the intense flash of fire. Lying on one side of the corridor was the charred corpse of a demon. Tendrils of smoke poured out from the eye sockets and mouth frozen in an eternal scream. Saul cast the beast a quick glance before moving on. They passed several more bodies, each one in the same condition as the last. They all walked the silent corridor, their weapons raised, expecting the worst. They entered the police station front foyer, not knowing what to expect, the least being 6 figures entering the ruined front doors, 2 of which were quick to raise their own weapons, which immediately turned into a Mexican standoff. "Drop your fucking guns," Apache growled. "You heard the man?" Bam Bam was quick to add. "Drop them yourself, asshole," Tarnay responded, taking several steps towards the bikers. "And we outnumber you," Saul said, not liking where this was all heading. "And I have these," Scott said reluctantly, holding out one of his grenades. This action stopped everyone in their tracks. "That's not necessary," Sarah said, lowering her gun. "I know, but I figured it would stop anyone from doing anything stupid. Plus, a show of goodwill on my part," Scott said, and tossed the grenade carefully to the paramedic, who caught it with one hand. Then breathed a huge sigh of relief when she saw that the pin was still inserted. "You did that with just a grenade?" Sarah asked. "Strapped to a gas bottle, I think it worked well," Scott said with a shrug. "Lucky we weren't down here at the time," Apache sneered. "From what we could see, the place was crawling with those things. You would have been dead either way," Tarnay said, clearly unimpressed with the bikers. Saul stepped forward between them. "It was a risky move, but I'm glad you did it," Saul said diplomatically. "Very gracious of you, but I'm guessing you're also here for the guns," Apache said. "We are, but we're also here for everyone else as well," Scott said cryptically. There was a long silence. "This man here is a special forces soldier. He found a government bunker, and he wants to take everyone there," Tarnay interjected. Chapter 29. Scott was both swift and thorough with his explanation of how they had come across their discovery of the bunker. Bethany was quick to confirm the truth of what the Delta operator had to say. No one present doubted her sincerity. "This all sounds too good to be true," Bam Bam said. "I agree. Not to mention the fact that I haven't actually laid eyes on this bunker would be enough to make anyone skeptical," Scott said. "I hate to be the one saying this, but why should we consider this?" Saul asked. "The portals are everywhere, and they are spewing out more creatures, monsters, demons into our world. From what we've seen, nothing can stop them. Your own ability to stop them coming in here is waning by the minute. You don't have a choice. None of us do," Scott emphasized. Saul nodded reluctantly. "Some hope is better than none," Scott added. 20 minutes later, they were all loaded up, carrying as much weapons and ammunition as they could carry. Even the children were doing their part. The Heisman building was less than a mile from the police station. However, it might have well been on the other side of the city. They were vulnerable with so many, not to mention the children in their protection. They knew that hammering their way in wasn't the best option. Instead, they stuck to the shadows of the burning city, doing their best to avoid the chaos and keeping out of view from the monsters that were literally everywhere. It took them an hour to make the trek to their intended destination. Hiding directly across the street, they stared up at the old steel and stone building, Built nearly 80 years earlier, it stood completely in darkness, like an ancient tombstone. The idea of entering now seemed like a bad idea. So, if this place does indeed have a hidden bunker in its basement, how the hell are we going to access it if there's no power? Apache asked with a predatory smile. I'm guessing that they have their own power source, but if you don't like my offer, you're free to go your own way, Scott said with a frown. I don't think that's what he meant, Sarah cut in. Oh, that's exactly what Mr. Apache had in mind. I'm doing this to save lives, but if the biker wants to be disruptive, then he can take a hike, Scott said. And what if I decided to take your key and let myself into Candyland? What then? Apache asked, leering in closely. Then it would be the last thing you'll ever do, Scott said simply, the point of a thin dagger touching the underside of the berserker's chin. But instead of being shocked, the biker smiled. Good. I'm glad to see you're not a complete government stooge, Apache replied with a confident smile. Scott shook his head, confused. Don't try to understand it, Saul whispered from behind. He had a pistol in his hand, prepared for the worst. He was glad when the biker had switched to a calmer mode. What's the plan now? Saul asked. I'm kind of running this by ear at the moment. We get in that lobby, get to the elevator, and get our asses down, Scott replied. As long as the children are our priority, I don't care how we do it, Saul said. My thoughts exactly. Scott called the play. It was simple. The Delta took the two bikers with him. They were to act as the battering ram in. Saul and Sarah acted as the flanking security, with Bethany, Kira, and the children moving tightly within the center. Finally, Tarnay and Jared held up the rear. They moved quickly in a tight formation. Anything that was non-human and in their vicinity was torn to shreds under their combined firepower. They breached the building, Jared and Tarnay slamming the doors behind them. The ex-firefighter quick to push the heavy reception furniture against the entrance as a barricade. The group looked around the darkened reception area. There was no light, no sign of people, or the demons running around outside. God, it's quiet in here, Bethany whispered. I don't mind that at all, Kira said. Well, it is nice not having monsters wanting to eat us, Sarah said, still clutching her weapon tightly. Scott and Saul instinctually scanned the area until they were satisfied that they were alone. Clear, Scott said, more out of trained habit than anything else. Good. Then if there is nothing else immediately trying to kill us, let's do what we're here to do, Bam Bam said. No one argued his course of logic. They rounded a slight corner until they found what they were looking for. 3 elevators. They were quick to make their way to the third and furthest. Tommy pressed the button, and nothing happened. Much to the group's disappointment. He pressed it several more times before his mother grabbed his arm. It's not going to work, Bethany said, clearly disheartened. Then we'll make it, Apache said, losing patience and grabbing a long steel blade from his boot. With a little careful manipulation, he managed to pry the door to the elevator open. The group was herded in. There's no power, Kira said. Scott hesitated. Surely this wasn't for nothing, Scott said, removing the key he had received from Major Elms and inserted it into the control panel, then turning it clockwise. The result was instantaneous. The control panel, it lit up like a Christmas tree. Everyone's eyes were now on it. The Delta operator cast a quick glance towards Bethany. Here goes nothing, he said to the group and pressed the down arrow. The doors to the elevator closed slowly. There was a gentle lurch, letting them all know that they were now moving. Apache started to whistle the tune. The girl from Ipanema. Really? Saul frowned. The biker ignored the question, his lone whistling carrying them as they journeyed into the bowels of the building. Chapter 38 years later. The teenage girl opened her eyes and peered around in the darkness. Over 20 beds were lined within the room, pages positioned near the door. The clock mounted on the wall said 4 a.m. Paige was careful not to make a sound as she climbed off the bed, getting dressed into combat boots, leather jackets, and black pants. She snuck from the room, being cautious not to wake the other 20 children she shared the room with. Her boots barely made a sound as she walked the dimly lit corridor, checking the pistol in her shoulder holster absently. She had performed the task thousands of times over the years, her adopted uncles taking a special interest in her formative years. She passed several more sleeping areas before arriving at the mess hall. A large, hulking figure sat alone at one of the many tables eating a bowl of porridge. The teenage girl came up beside him. "Morning, Pops," she said in a spirited voice. She leant in and gave him a kiss on the temple. Jared grunted, but the faintest of smiles touched his lips. The girl made her way to the large industrial kitchen and helped herself to the pot of simmering porridge, quick to join Jared at the table. "We're the first up?" she asked, not expecting the big man to answer. He simply nodded. Paige proceeded to talk about all manner of things, what happened last night, gossip, and the world they had created within the bunker. Jared listened as he ate his breakfast, grunted every so often, but never saying a word. "Morning, a-holes," a voice called out. "Morning, Apache," Paige said with a smile. "Morning, Princess," the biker said, tussling the girl's hair. "I hate it when you call me that," Paige frowned. Jared grunted. The biker turned and regarded the giant. "So, what's new, big man? Watch any good shows on the box last night? Seeing anyone at the moment?" Apache asked in a mocking tone. Jared frowned and went back to his breakfast. "Better to ignore him, Axe?" Sarah said, entering with Saul and Scott. "Better for who?" Apache asked. "Better for you. You piss off the big fella and he's liable to put you through that 6-inch steel plate wall," Scott added, holding out a fist to Jared, who tapped it with his own. "I'd have to agree with him," Bam Bam said, entering with Tarnay. Jared placed down his spoon and smiled at Apache. "One day, I'm gonna have to test that theory," Apache said, scratching his chin thoughtfully. Jared grunted. He said, "Anytime, anywhere. But first you'll just have to grow a pair," Paige said. There was a long silence. "Whoa!" they all cried out with laughter. "Ha! She got you, bro?" Bam Bam said, clapping a hand on Apache's shoulder. "I thought we were friends," Apache said to Paige in mock hurt. "We are, which is why I'm sparing you huge pain," Paige said, before placing a large spoon of porridge into her mouth. Apache was about to respond when the arm of Bam Bam steered him towards breakfast. "Quit while you're behind, old buddy," Bam Bam said with a grin. They had finished breakfast when Saul addressed the group. Expressions became serious. "It's been 2 weeks since our last run," Saul said. "Great times, great people," Apache joked. "We need more medical supplies. We need to push further west," Saul insisted. "We've exhausted everything up to the river," Bam Bam said. "Then we need to push past the river," Saul said. "That's a big ask. Those things love the water, shit. They fucking thrive in it. It's risky," Tarnay said. "I'm dealing with 2 really sick children. Are you going to tell them they can't have the meds they need?" "I won't do it," Sarah was quick to reply. "Nor I, just stating a fact," Tarnay said. "How bad?" Scott asked. "Rebecca has a temperature just under 104. If it goes much higher, We could risk irreversible problems, potentially death. Stephen's temp isn't as high. Yet, but he's younger. Not quite as strong, Sarah said grimly. Not much choice then, is it? Apache said. I've got a list of the medications we need. Everyone will get a copy, Sarah said. What else is on the list? Tarnay asked. As usual, canned goods, weapons, and ammo, Scott said. Can I make a suggestion then? Bam Bam said. Shoot, Saul replied. Maybe we could grab some DVDs because I'm getting sick to death of watching reruns of Friends, Bam Bam said, pretending to vomit. Hey, I like Friends, Paige said. Jared shook his head. Agreed. If we have to sit out the apocalypse, then let's do it in style. No Walking Dead, though, Saul said, and the group broke out into laughter. Well, if there is nothing else, we'll meet at the gate in 1 hour, Scott said. Just before each run, the ex-detective conducted a tour of the bunker. There were 4 levels. The bottom level was all maintenance, sewerage, water, and power. The second level, accommodation. When they had first arrived at the bunker, barely a dozen people, now 8 years later, they were close to 60. The third level, the kitchen, and recreation areas. The fourth and top level were the armory and training area. Saul stopped in to see Kira. She was quietly reading a book by torchlight, not wanting to wake the others she shared a room with. Hey, Saul said in a soft tone. Kira looked up from her book. Hey yourself. Did you want anything while I'm out? Saul asked. She thought the question over. More books. If that's possible, Kira asked. I'll see what I can do, Saul said, turning to leave. Please be careful, Kira said, an aching concern in her eyes. She knew her words would have no impact on his decision to leave, or whether he would die on the surface. Saul paused mid-step. Always am, Saul replied, not turning. He left the woman to her thoughts. The others were waiting for him at the armory, each member preparing themselves for what awaited on the surface. Over the years, their scavenger runs had led to the accumulation of a vast array of weaponry. Everything from bladed weapons to those powered by gunpowder. Of the number living within the bunker, only those that now stood in the armory were fighters. The rest were more than happy to cook, clean, teach, and provide maintenance of the facility. Scott and Saul were considered the co-leaders of the group, whose sole purpose was to find supplies and other survivors. Dress options were simple, dark, and durable. They had also learned to wear combat knee and elbow guards. Each member of the team had their own weapons. Hand-picked, they had practiced and used them on the surface countless times. They were in many ways an extension of themselves. Tarnay had a tactical shotgun, twin bandoliers of shells across each shoulder. Scott, a modified M4. Saul, a Western-styled lever action. Apache and Bam Bam had tricked out AK-47s, folding stocks and combat black. Sarah carried an AR-15 and a pistol on each hip. This was copied down to the letter by Paige. Jared was the only member of the group that didn't carry a firearm. Instead, he had what Bam Bam had nicknamed Satan's woodchopper. It was a two-handed, double-sided axe, forged from spring steel, the blade as long as a man's forearm. The letters P and T engraved into the steel handle. Along with their primary weapons, they had backup pistols and knives. Along with weapons, they all carried a backpack. Inside, first aid supplies, flares, water, rations, and other survivalist equipment. Everyone checked and cross-checked each other's gear. I have a bad feeling about this, Sarah said behind Saul, who was feeding rounds into his weapons chamber. You say that every time. It's bad luck, Saul replied with a frown. Maybe we're all here because I continue to say it, Sarah countered. which is why she says it. Just relax, Scott said, slinging his assault rifle. Going topside. Impossible, Saul grumbled. I'd have to agree on that, Bam Bam said. Oh, I don't know. Reminds me of holidays in Detroit, Apache said with a grin. Even in winter, Detroit isn't that bad, Tarnay chuckled. And when was the last time you were there? Apache said. The last time I visited Yo Mama's, Tarnay replied, much to everyone's amusement. Now that we have the Tarnay and Apache show out of the way, is everyone ready to get to work? Saul interrupted. The mood was immediately lowered. Slowly, gingerly, like a funeral procession, they made their way up to the bunker's entrance. Two figures met them there. A man almost as big as Jared. In his hands he held a makeshift sledgehammer. His name was Russell, but everyone called him Vulcan. When he wasn't guarding the entrance, he was the bunker's premier blacksmith. The other man in a former life was known as Jody, but everyone called him Thunderbolt. This was for his ability to kill the monsters from immense distances. In his hands, he carried a long-range rifle. He was also responsible for maintaining the armory and making the ammunition. Both men were aware of the enormous responsibility they had, and they both bore the burden with quiet dignity. My man, Apache said, clapping one hand on Thunderbolt's shoulder. He was quickly joined by Tarnay and Scott, both eager to greet the gunsmith. Vulcan and Jared bumped their gigantic fists together in greeting, the man with the hammer quick to tussle Paige's hair. I hate it when you do that, Paige pretended to scowl. That's not what Axe said, Vulcan was quick to reply. If he actually said that, or anything, then I would let you muss my hair all bloody day, Paige replied, quick to touch Jared's arm tenderly, like the father she had never known. You have my grocery list? Thunderbolt asked. I do, Scott replied. Good, because there are a few items that we are currently running dangerously low on, Thunderbolt stressed. I know, Scott interjected, knowing the importance of what was required, but not wanting to dredge it up in front of the others. Have you been taking the tablets I gave you? Sarah asked. Yes, Mum, Vulcan joked. I mean it. If you have any more dizzy spells, please let me know, Sarah insisted. You're about to go topside and you're worried about my health. You just get yourself back here safe and sound, and you can nag me all you want, Vulcan said. Agreed, Sarah grinned. Okay, people, let's do this, Saul announced to the group. There was no complaining from anyone. Collectively, they became serious and tense. They bowed their heads and held hands. O Lord, defend your children against the face of the enemy. Allow them to be your cleansing sword against the army of Satan. Fill their hearts with courage to do what must be done. But most importantly, bring each one home to those here that love and cherish them. Amen, Thunderbolt said solemnly. Amen, they all repeated, save Jared, who instinctively squeezed Paige's hand tight. Vulcan readied himself at the door to the elevator and removed the key from around his neck. The very same key Scott had used 8 years ago when they had first come down. The trip to the surface took about a minute to accomplish. They did it in total silence. Each member of the group focused their thoughts on whatever they found calming. The elevator came to an abrupt stop. They all readied themselves, weapons primed for action. They all knew that there was a 10-second delay at the top before the doors opened. Vulcan and Thunderbolt stood at the fore. Silently, the doors opened. The dim light of the elevator couldn't prepare themselves for the complete darkness of the surface. They remained silent and still, letting their senses soak up the world beyond. Nothing. There was a brief nod between the two elevator sentinels before they stepped out from the safety of the shaft and took their posts either side, ready to use their weapons to strike down any threat that might present itself. "Clear," the two men said in unison. Scott led the group out and into the building foyer. They too took up defensive positions, satisfied that they were indeed alone. Scott signaled to Thunderbolt and Vulcan. "Don't be out too long," Vulcan whispered. "We'll be listening out," Thunderbolt added, just as the doors to the elevator closed. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Operation DarkStar has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.